The sun dipped low over Coruscant's core world, casting golden light across spires and banners fluttering in celebration. Today was Valentine's Day, a festival unlike any other in this era of fragile peace. Couples strolled along sky bridges, hollow projectors projected heart-shaped constellations, and vendors hawked delicacies from across the galaxy. Naboo sweets, Corellian pastries, and delicate droids programmed to deliver roses. The hum of speeders and chatter of citizens formed a symphony of calm, yet the Force itself quivered with an unfamiliar disturbance. High above the city, slicing through clouds and stirring winds that tossed airspeeder traffic into confusion, a figure appeared. Homelander hovered effortlessly, his cape snapping dramatically in the artificial breeze generated by the city's environmental shields. He was a spectacle of power, eyes glowing with a red intensity, flight streaks shimmering like a comet in the fading daylight. For the citizens below, he was an impossible sight, an alien of unimaginable might, descending silently on a festival that had never seen anything like him. Even the guards of the New Republic, trained to intercept and neutralize threats, hesitated. Their sensors picked up readings off the charts, energy signatures inconsistent with known species, output levels rivaling planetary defense systems, and an aura of presence so commanding that those nearby felt an instinctive awe and a subtle fear. Rey stood on a balcony overlooking the central plaza, meditating with eyes closed as she attempted to center herself in the Force. She had felt a disturbance earlier in the day, a ripple of dissonant energy threading through the fabric of the galaxy. Now that presence had manifested. The Force whispered warnings. This was not merely another traveler, pirate, or remnant of the Empire. This being was different. Vastly powerful, morally ambiguous, and untested within this galaxy. Rey's grip tightened on her lightsaber hilt, her instincts a blend of curiosity and caution. Below, the festival erupted in chaos. Droids dropped trays of sweets, a Corellian couple toppled into a fountain, clutching each other in alarm. Vendors screamed as their stalls were upended by the gusts of wind from Homelander's descent. And yet, there was a strange grace in his movements, a theatrical flair that both enchanted and unnerved the crowd. Children pointed and cheered, thinking it some advanced holographic performance. Adults scrambled for cover. HoloNet broadcasters frantically switched frequencies, capturing the impossible sight of a man who seemed to defy every law of physics.
Homelander landed on a central plaza column with a casual power that suggested amusement rather than threat. His head tilted slightly as he surveyed the crowd, scanning for reactions. And then he saw her, Rey, standing firm despite the chaos, her lightsaber glowing faintly in the dim sunlight, eyes focused yet wary. Something in her presence drew him in. The hum of the Force radiating like a siren's call, a power that resonated with his own sense of supremacy, yet hinted at purity, morality, and defiance. A smile crept across his lips, both charming and unnerving. "Interesting," he murmured to himself, voice carrying across the plaza. "Not like anyone I've ever met." Rey's senses screamed caution. She raised her lightsaber fully, igniting the blue blade with a hum that harmonized with the tension in the air. "Who are you?" she called, her voice steady but layered with authority. "And why are you here?" The crowd fell silent, every citizen sensing the collision of two extraordinary presences. Homelander tilted his head, studying her with a mix of curiosity and amusement. "I go by many names where I come from," he said smoothly. "But for now, you can call me Homelander, and I think we should talk." Rey's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the awareness that the Force was trying to prepare her for a presence she had never encountered. This was no Sith, no remnant of the Empire, no rogue Jedi. This was something else entirely. Homelander exuded confidence, invincibility, and an unpredictability that even she could not fully gauge. Yet beneath the raw power, there was something almost human, or at least something that might resemble human emotion. As they regarded each other, the city around them seemed to pause. Droids floated mid-air, vendors froze mid-gesture, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The Force, sensitive as it was to morality and intent, shivered at the potential convergence of light and chaotic power. This was more than a first contact. This was the beginning of a moral and emotional storm that would ripple through the galaxy. Homelander floated down to the plaza floor with effortless precision, landing a few meters from Rey. He offered a casual bow, an almost playful gesture that belied the raw force radiating from him. "I've seen many worlds," he said smoothly, "but yours has a certain charm. And you," he added, tilting his head toward Rey, "are unlike anyone I've ever met. I like that." Rey's fingers tightened slightly around her lightsaber, her mind racing. There was undeniable attraction in the energy he radiated, not just physical, but something more subtle, dangerous, and intoxicating. The Force was cautioning her, warning her of the potential consequences. Yet a part of her curiosity, a part she could not deny, leaned in. Above them, shadows moved, Imperial remnants taking note of the anomaly, criminals calculating opportunities, and New Republic officials preparing a delicate diplomatic approach. The galaxy was watching, whether it realized it or not. As this Valentine's Day transformed from festival celebration to unprecedented convergence of power, morality, and emotion. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop a character name in comments.
The plaza was still trembling from Homelander's dramatic entrance when the first signals of organized response rippled through the city. Hovercars streaked toward the disturbance, New Republic security teams coordinating through encrypted comms. Rey, still standing near the fountain, sensed the subtle shifts in the Force. Homelander was not acting with outright malice, yet. There was power, but also unpredictability. That combination made him uniquely dangerous. Homelander's gaze swept over the approaching security forces, his red eyes flicking with amusement. "Are they going to fight me?" he asked softly, almost rhetorically. He didn't wait for an answer. With a casual flick of his hand, the nearest speeder was lifted off the ground, spinning harmlessly in the air before he set it down gently, far from civilians. A collective gasp echoed from the crowd. Not a single New Republic trooper dared fire. Each knew instinctively that any confrontation would be suicidal. Rey's lightsaber hummed in her grip, a comforting resonance amid the chaos. "You may not be here to harm them," she said, voice steady, "but I won't let you act unchecked." She stepped forward, her stance calm, yet resolute. She reached out with the Force, probing, seeking truth. Homelander's essence was strange, alien, almost impenetrable, yet she felt faint threads of emotion, curiosity, pride, something akin to longing. Homelander noticed her probing and tilted his head, a faint smirk forming. "Ah, the Force. I can sense it. Interesting. So many ways to measure power." He hovered slightly, moving closer to her, his presence a mix of warmth and intimidation. "You have strength. I like strength." Before Rey could respond, a squad of Imperial remnants emerged from the shadows of a nearby alley, clad in black and gray armor, blasters raised. Their leader, a tall, angular figure, sneered. "So, this is the anomaly that's been reported," he said, voice filtered through a comms modulator. "You may have crossed into the wrong galaxy, friend." Homelander's eyes glowed red, and he tilted his head in amusement. "Friend?" he mused, scanning the soldiers. "They don't look friendly to me, but that's okay. I don't need them to be." In a heartbeat, he leapt into the air, dodging a volley of blaster fire with inhuman reflexes. Lasers bounced off the plaza columns and glass surfaces, creating sparks that reflected like fireworks in the evening light. Ray reacted instinctively, raising her blade to deflect a stray shot. The force pulsed through her, guiding her movements with uncanny precision. She realized that Homelander's presence, while chaotic, could be an ally, if only he could be controlled, reasoned with, or persuaded. But his alien sense of morality complicated everything. The Imperial leader growled and activated a device, a small black sphere that began projecting a localized gravity field. It pulsed, attempting to tether Homelander. Yet he laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and with a flick of his hand, the device shattered mid-air. His speed, strength, and reflexes were absolute. He was not meant to be contained by the galaxy's technology. Yet Ray sensed a subtle limitation. Homelander was not native to this galaxy. His energy output fluctuated in hyperspace fields and under certain planetary atmospheres. The Force gave her a hint. There was a weakness, not in power, but in adaptation. If leveraged correctly, she could influence his actions without fighting him directly. The crowd's panic escalated as more civilians stumbled into the chaos. Homelander, noting Ray's position, made a deliberate choice. Rather than continue the spectacle, he landed gently beside her. His smile was both charming and disarming. "I could clear this entire city in a second," he said, softly, eyes flicking toward the Imperial forces. "I want to see how you handle it first." Ray felt a ripple of conflicting emotions. She respected power, but she was not tempted by domination. She was tempted by the challenge of morality and strategy. "We do this my way," she said, activating her lightsaber fully. The blade cast a blue glow across her determined features. "You may have strength, but this galaxy values balance."
Homelander's gaze lingered on her, a strange mix of admiration and desire. He hovered in place, considering her words. The Imperials below, unsure how to proceed, hesitated. Their weapons still aimed, but fear and awe mingled with tactical calculation. The criminal underworld, watching from a distance, began plotting, some wishing to ally, others to exploit, others simply waiting for chaos to create opportunity. Suddenly, a small explosion near a vendor stall jolted the plaza. Blaster fire erupted from hidden gang members attempting to capitalize on the confusion. Civilians screamed, scrambling for cover. Ray instinctively stepped forward, moving with fluid precision to deflect fire while using the Force to shield the panicked crowd. Homelander mirrored her movements, not out of obligation, but curiosity, testing his abilities in tandem with hers. Together, they created an unintended, unstable synergy, a powerful protectorate that drew the attention of all factions simultaneously. As the skirmish escalated, Ray realized something critical. This Valentine's Day, the galaxy wasn't just witnessing a battle, it was witnessing the convergence of morality and power. Homelander, for all his invincibility, responded not to command, but to fascination, admiration, and perhaps even nascent affection. For Ray, the challenge was internal as much as external. Could she guide, influence, or even survive the moral complexity of this being without succumbing to attraction or recklessness? The Force whispered, warning of escalation, yet hinting at potential alliance. Decisions made in these moments would ripple across sectors, affecting factions, lives, and perhaps even the balance of the galaxy itself. Above the plaza, the clouds swirled unnaturally, as if reflecting the tension below. The New Republic's hover squads circled, unsure whether to intervene. The Empire remnants whispered through encrypted channels, plotting capture or coercion. The criminal underworld calculated profit margins from chaos. And in the center, Ray and Homelander faced each other, an unspoken question hanging between them. Friend? Foe? Or something more complex?
If Rey could navigate this dangerous intersection of power, morality, and emotional tension, she might shape not only this encounter, but the course of galactic history itself. And for Homelander, this galaxy offered a playground unlike any other, a place where admiration could be earned, loyalty tested, and perhaps love discovered. The evening sky over Coruscant darkened into a bruised purple, punctuated by streaks of orange from the setting sun. Sparks from blaster fire still danced across the plaza, reflecting in the glassy surfaces of nearby towers. Civilians huddled behind vendor stalls and low walls, peering nervously at the spectacle unfolding above them. Rey's lightsaber hummed steadily in her hand, the blade a beacon of calm amidst the chaos. Homelander hovered a few meters away, the soft red glow of his eyes cutting through the dim light, scanning every movement with calculated amusement. Rey moved with decisive precision, her knowledge of the Force guiding every step. She extended her awareness outward, feeling the invisible threads of intent, power, and danger intertwining around the plaza. Homelander's presence was chaotic, a pulsing vortex of raw energy. Yet beneath the overwhelming might, there was an unpredictability she could sense, a subtle pattern, almost human in its inconsistencies. She understood that if she could influence that pattern, even slightly, she could prevent widespread devastation. Homelander, noticing her focus, tilted his head curiously. "You're reading me," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and playful challenge. "I like that. Most people either run or fight without understanding." He hovered closer, testing the distance, gauging her reactions. "You're not afraid?" Rey's response was measured. "Fear is useful," she said, "but knowing when to act is better." She kept her blade at the ready, though she did not move aggressively. The Force hummed around them, vibrating with tension and anticipation. From the shadows, Imperial remnants observed the exchange, whispering among themselves. "Contain him," one muttered through a comlink. "We don't know what he's capable of, but we can't risk allowing him to align with the Jedi." Their plan was subtle: lure Homelander into a controlled trap using civilian distractions and energy nets. But even as they coordinated, Homelander's perception was superior. He spotted the movements almost before they occurred, a terrifying blend of instinct and superhuman reflexes. With a single leap, Homelander soared over their trap, narrowly avoiding an energy net that would have immobilized a normal being. He landed lightly, his cape snapping dramatically, sending sparks from exposed electrical lines dancing across the plaza. "Predictable," he murmured, smirking. "You're going to have to try harder than that."
Rey recognized the escalating threat. The Imperials were desperate, and the situation could quickly spiral into mass casualties if unchecked. She extended her hand, using the Force to subtly manipulate the trajectory of blaster fire, deflecting shots harmlessly into the air. Homelander mirrored her movements, not by instruction, but by fascination. There was an unspoken rhythm forming between them, one of tentative cooperation without trust, attraction without surrender. The criminal underworld, watching from the rooftops and narrow alleys, whispered excitedly among themselves. Some saw opportunity to strike, others to exploit, and a few simply watched, sensing the birth of a power struggle that could reshape the city. Homelander, aware of these observers, tilted his head and smiled faintly. "So many players," he said, voice low, almost contemplative. "I wonder who will survive the night." Meanwhile, Rey felt a strange pull. The Force was warning her not only of physical danger, but of emotional entanglement. Homelander was alien, morally fluid, and intoxicating in his power, yet there was a sincerity in his attention toward her that she could not ignore. She kept her focus, aware that a single lapse could result in disaster for the civilians or even the galaxy. An explosion erupted near a corner of the plaza, sending debris flying. Homelander reacted instantly, catching a falling metal beam with one hand and redirecting it harmlessly.
Rey used the moment to close distance between them, stepping past the chaos with the grace and precision of a Jedi. "We need to contain this before it escalates," she said, eyes locking with his. "You're strong, but even strength without control can destroy everything." Homelander hovered for a heartbeat, considering her words. Then, with a low laugh, he tilted his head. "I could destroy it all," he said, glancing at the terrified crowd. "But I won't. Not if you want to see what I can really do." His gaze lingered on her, a mix of challenge and something more profound, curiosity, admiration, and a nascent, dangerous affection.
The Imperials, frustrated by their failure to trap him, launched a more coordinated strike. Multiple troopers fired energy blasts simultaneously, aiming to overwhelm even his reflexes. Homelander, sensing the pattern, dodged with fluid perfection, his flight arcs defying physics. The civilians below scattered, but thanks to Rey's subtle force manipulations, no one was seriously harmed. At that moment, a moral choice crystallized in Rey's mind. She could attempt to subdue him with the Force, a risky move that could be seen as aggression and potentially provoke catastrophic retaliation. Or she could attempt diplomacy, appealing to the fragment of morality and curiosity she sensed in him. Choosing diplomacy would be risky. Homelander was capricious and his emotions volatile. But it might also forge a bond that could prevent greater disaster. She inhaled deeply, focusing. "You don't have to destroy anything," she said calmly, stepping closer, blade still ready but lowered slightly. "This world doesn't belong to you, but it could belong to someone you choose to protect. You don't have to be alone." Homelander tilted his head, studying her intently. The chaos around them continued, factions maneuvering, plans in motion. Yet for a brief instant, the plaza became a stage for a different kind of confrontation, not just physical, but moral and emotional. His expression softened slightly, almost imperceptibly, and he hovered closer to her. "You're different," he said. "Most would beg or fight. You talk." The Force hummed with the tension of their interaction. Allies, enemies, civilians, and opportunists all waited to see what choice he would make next. The galaxy had never witnessed a being of this magnitude responding to compassion, strategy, or the prospect of connection rather than domination. And Rey, acutely aware of the precarious balance, understood that whatever happened next could determine the course of the galaxy, and perhaps her own heart. The night had settled fully over Coruscant, yet the plaza remained a tempest of chaos and light. Sparks still flickered from toppled hollow stalls, and the distant hum of hover cars reflected against the glass towers. Rey remained at the center, lightsaber casting an ethereal blue glow across her determined face, while Homelander hovered nearby, almost languidly, yet every motion contained explosive potential. The Force rippled around them, taut like a drawn bowstring, as both allies and adversaries weighed the unfolding scene. Imperial remnants regrouped at the edge of the plaza, their armored boots pounding against the smooth metal walkways. "He's adapting," muttered the squad leader, frustration clear in his voice. "We need a new plan. All conventional traps fail. This thing isn't bound by our laws or weapons." He gestured toward a small black holocron, an artifact stolen from an Imperial research facility. "Perhaps the Jedi have the answer," he added with a sneer, knowing full well Rey was present. Homelander's eyes flicked toward the holocron, curiosity piqued. "Interesting toys," he said. "I like gadgets. They usually explode in fun ways." He hovered closer to Rey, voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You have to admit, controlling all these little players is entertaining." There was no threat in his tone, yet the implication of unbridled power hung in the air like smoke. Rey's response was measured, her grip on her saber unwavering. "Entertainment at the cost of lives is not strength, it's recklessness," she said.
Her voice carried authority, yet also an undercurrent of empathy. The force nudged her awareness toward the crowd. Civilians, though frightened, were unharmed so far, a testament to her subtle but precise influence. The criminal underworld, observing from shadowed rooftops, whispered strategies among themselves. Syndicates calculated profit from chaos, evaluating whether to ally with Homelander, manipulate him, or simply wait for the fallout. For them, this anomaly was a goldmine or a catastrophe, and they would hedge their bets carefully. A sudden, sharp pulse rattled the plaza. A group of Imperial jetpack troopers descended, aiming directly for Homelander. Laser fire streaked through the air. In an instant, Homelander accelerated upward, leaving streaks of motion that blurred against the darkened sky. He returned in a heartbeat, red eyes glowing as he landed beside Ray. "Predictable," he said softly. "You think you can overwhelm me with numbers, tactics, or tech? I'm beyond it." Ray exhaled slowly, feeling the subtle limit of her influence. The Force allowed guidance, but not control. She could shape outcomes indirectly, sense intent, and protect innocence, but she could not bend Homelander's will entirely. She understood that any misstep could escalate into disaster. Her moral challenge crystallized: how to balance negotiation, restraint, and defense in the presence of such overwhelming power.
"Why are you here?" she asked, cutting through the tension. Her voice was calm but forceful, demanding clarity. "Not just on this world, but in this galaxy. Who sent you? Why now?" Homelander's smirk softened into something almost contemplative. "No one sent me," he said. "I appear where I want, when I want. But now I'm here, and I think I like it." His eyes lingered on her, a spark of genuine fascination evident beneath the familiar arrogance. "You're different, strong, clever, and, well, interesting." Ray sensed the subtle shift in the Force. The moral danger was real. His attraction to her hinted at vulnerability, and yet his immense power made that vulnerability almost inconsequential. She needed to maintain control, not just through strength alone, but through diplomacy, understanding, and the Force itself. The Imperials renewed their attack, coordinating a flanking maneuver from above. Homelander reacted instinctively, intercepting the blasts mid-air with a hand and redirecting them safely into the plaza sky. Sparks rained down harmlessly, reflecting off glass towers like fireworks. Civilians ducked, terrified but unharmed. Ray stepped forward, projecting protective shields with the Force, subtly guiding the displaced energy to ensure safety. For a fleeting moment, their cooperation, though unspoken, was perfect. Homelander's raw power and Ray's mastery of the Force complemented one another, a dance of chaos and control. The moral tension persisted. She had to navigate attraction, diplomacy, and protection, while he tested the boundaries of his influence and curiosity. Above them, the New Republic monitored the unfolding spectacle, their ships circling, sensors scanning for energy readings off the charts. Rebels whispered, concerned about a potential new threat, and yet intrigued by the possibility of an unexpected ally if Homelander could be guided. Meanwhile, shadowed criminal figures and opportunistic factions saw opportunity. They could manipulate either both of these superpowered beings for profit, or simply wait for destruction to create their advantage. In the center of it all, Ray and Homelander shared a quiet, tense moment. Despite the chaos surrounding them, the city below, and the myriad factions converging, something fragile and complex began to form. An unspoken understanding, a recognition of mutual power, and perhaps the first stirrings of something resembling connection, love, curiosity, or dangerous fascination. The plaza, still lit by fractured lights and scattered sparks, seemed suspended in time. In that instant, the galaxy held its breath, uncertain what the night would bring. Catastrophe, romance, or a volatile mixture of both. One thing was certain: Valentine's Day would never be the same.
The air above Coruscant's core world grew thick with tension, crackling with the residual energy of unleashed abilities and unseen forces. Ray's senses remained fully attuned to Homelander's presence, noting subtle changes in his behavior. He wasn't just powerful, he was calculating, amused, and increasingly attentive to her, measuring her responses as if testing boundaries she hadn't even realized she had. Every flicker of his red eyes, every tilt of his head spoke volumes to someone sensitive to the Force. The New Republic's hover squads hovered at the edge of the city, unsure whether to intervene or observe. Leaders debated whether Homelander should be considered a threat, a potential ally, or something far more unpredictable. Meanwhile, word of the anomaly spread through communication channels, reaching criminal syndicates and remnants of the Empire, who began mobilizing with their own agendas. Opportunists everywhere understood that the arrival of this being was unprecedented and possibly profitable. Homelander floated effortlessly in the plaza's center, the calm before his potential storm. "You're remarkable," he said to Ray, voice low but carrying over the plaza. Most beings of your kind are predictable, reactive, but you're something else." His gaze lingered, almost piercing through her defenses. Ray could feel the weight of both admiration and something deeper, something akin to attraction, but dangerous, foreign, and complex. Ray knew that she needed to act decisively. The Empire remnants had coordinated their attack, deploying specialized combat droids armed with experimental energy weapons. These were not standard blasters. The pulses were calibrated to overwhelm even beings with enhanced durability. Homelander, sensing the threat, leaped into the air with inhuman agility, dodging blasts and dismantling droids mid-flight with minimal effort. The force of his blows shattered plaza columns and sent fragments flying harmlessly into the sky, yet the civilians remained untouched thanks to Ray's subtle force shielding. She realized that she was witnessing the limits of coordination between two immensely powerful beings. Homelander's raw superhuman instinct, combined with her strategic mastery of the Force, created a defensive and offensive synergy neither fully intended, yet both relied upon instinctively. The moral complexity of the situation became undeniable. Ray could easily subdue him using Jedi techniques, but to do so would risk harming innocent civilians and potentially provoke his wrath. Conversely, allowing him free rein threatened the city and risked escalating his attention toward destructive impulses. Her decision became a delicate negotiation of influence, empathy, and subtle guidance through the Force. "Listen," Ray called, projecting calm authority as the droids closed in. "You don't need to fight them. Control, not destruction, defines strength." Her voice carried a weight that resonated through the plaza, amplified by the Force itself. Homelander tilted his head, a faint smile appearing. "You're trying to teach me?" he asked, amusement lacing his tone. "Bold. I like bold." Before Ray could respond, a sudden eruption from the city's industrial sector sent a plume of smoke into the night. Imperial reinforcements, seeing the growing spectacle, moved to flank the plaza. Homelander's attention snapped to the new threat, but rather than attacking recklessly, he hovered in place, measuring the options. He had full capacity, yet he was curiously restrained, an almost human choice, guided not by survival instincts alone, but by an interest in Ray's perspective. The Force rippled around Ray, hinting at subtle opportunities. She could steer the confrontation, influence the path of explosions, and shield civilians, all while testing the boundaries of Homelander's willingness to cooperate. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the knowledge that every choice carried profound consequences. In that moment, a realization crystallized. The balance of power was not simply a contest of strength, it was a complex interplay of morality, influence, and attraction. Homelander, despite his overwhelming ability, was capable of choices guided by curiosity and perhaps nascent affection. Rey, equally aware of her own vulnerability and moral responsibility, now faced the challenge of guiding a being whose power dwarfed the galaxy itself. The city held its breath. Civilians, factions, and opportunists alike watched, whether aware or not, as the interplay of morality, power, and emotion unfolded. Above the plaza, Homelander's cape billowed in the artificial wind as he floated, observing Rey with a mix of amusement and intrigue. She met his gaze, unwavering, recognizing the first stirrings of trust, or at least cooperation. "Stay close," Homelander said, finally, voice low but carrying an edge of excitement. "Let's see how this dance ends." The word was casual, playful, yet underpinned with a potent mixture of threat and fascination. Rey felt the Force guide her towards subtle defensive maneuvers, while her mind raced through strategy, morality, and the increasingly dangerous pull of attraction. In the shadows, the Empire, New Republic, and criminal factions recalibrated their plans. None could predict the outcome of this delicate interplay, yet all sensed that this Valentine's Day would mark a turning point, one that would ripple through the galaxy, shaping alliances, conflicts, and hearts alike. For Rey and Homelander, the night was only beginning, and in the interplay of power, attraction, and moral choice, the true battle of wills and hearts was about to unfold.
The city lights of Coruscant shimmered beneath an indigo sky, casting fractured reflections across the plaza still scattered with debris. Sparks from toppled droid vendors and fractured energy conduits danced across the metal walkways. Civilians huddled behind walls, peering out with a mixture of terror and awe. Rey stood at the center, lightsaber steady, eyes narrowed yet attentive, every muscle poised to act. Homelander hovered nearby, his crimson gaze scanning both the environment and her, a predator curious about its counterpart. The New Republic's intelligence comms crackled faintly as reconnaissance droids relayed streams of data from above. Leaders debated contingency protocols. Should they attempt direct engagement with this being, whose power dwarfed all known measures, or focus on evacuation and observation? Empire remnants, hidden within the city's lower levels, recalculated strategy, moving covertly to flank the plaza. Meanwhile, the criminal underworld whispered across encrypted channels, each faction weighing profit versus risk in the unfolding chaos. Homelander's movements were fluid, confident, and deliberate. He adjusted his trajectory to avoid harming civilians, but every motion conveyed dominance and effortless power. "You're cautious," he noted, floating closer to Rey. "I like that. Not many beings take the time to think before they act." His voice was low, measured, tinged with fascination and amusement. Rey responded with a subtle shift in posture, aware that the Force allowed her to sense his intent, but not to control him fully. A sudden volley of blaster fire erupted from Imperial remnants, targeting Homelander with rapid precision. Droids fired energy pulses, each calibrated to test his reflexes and durability. With a flick of his wrist, he redirected several bolts into the air, disintegrating others with bursts of laser heat vision. The crowd below ducked instinctively, but thanks to Rey's subtle protective manipulations, none were harmed. The plaza had become a stage where raw strength, tactical skill, and moral responsibility collided in real time. Rey sensed an opportunity in the chaos. Using the Force, she subtly nudged the trajectory of the droid reinforcements, steering them harmlessly away from civilians while maintaining the illusion of imminent threat. Homelander observed her actions, eyes narrowing with curiosity. "You're clever," he said, his tone a mix of admiration and challenge. "I like clever." The moral complexity of the encounter intensified. Homelander's immense power could obliterate any threat, but he exercised restraint, an unusual choice that spoke to his emerging fascination with Rey and his latent capacity for selective empathy. Rey, in turn, felt the dual pull of attraction and duty,
aware that a single misstep could unleash catastrophic consequences. She realized that guiding him required patience, strategic thinking, and subtle emotional influence, a delicate balance between control and cooperation. Amid the tension, an explosion erupted near the industrial sector. The shock wave rippled through the plaza, throwing debris into the air. Civilians screamed, scattering behind cover. Homelander reacted instantly, lifting a metal beam with one hand and redirecting it harmlessly, his movements precise and almost playful. Ray extended her hand, projecting a protective force barrier around the nearest civilians, guiding them to safety while monitoring Homelander's reactions. A brief silence fell between them as the dust settled. Homelander hovered slightly above her, studying her with an intensity that was both unsettling and magnetic. "You're different," he murmured. "Most would panic or fight. You adapt, guide, and survive. It's impressive." His tone carried no malice, yet the underlying threat of overwhelming power lingered. Ray exhaled slowly, grounding herself in the force. She knew the night's trials were far from over. The Empire remnants would regroup, criminals would probe for opportunity, and the city remained a volatile environment. Yet for the first time since his arrival, Homelander seemed receptive, not just to cooperation, but to her moral guidance. The faint glow of Valentine's Day decorations flickered in the periphery, a surreal reminder of the day's original intent. Amid chaos, destruction, and fear, a subtle, fragile connection was forming between the two extraordinary beings. Attraction and curiosity interwove with strategy, morality, and raw power, creating a tension as volatile as the galaxy around them. Above the plaza, clouds swirled as if reflecting the storm below. In the shadows, observers, New Republic, Empire remnants, and criminal factions alike paused, sensing a turning point. The dance of power and emotion between Ray and Homelander was unprecedented. Its consequences would ripple across sectors, influencing alliances, conflicts, and hearts in ways the galaxy had never seen. "Stay with me," Homelander said softly, hovering closer. "Let's see how far this game can go." Ray's lightsaber glowed steadily as she met his gaze, aware that each choice now carried not just tactical consequences, but the weight of moral, emotional, and galactic significance. The night deepened over Coruscant, the cityscape now painted in shifting neon and the fractured reflections of emergency lights. The plaza, though cleared of most civilians, remained a battlefield of perception, power, and subtle influence. Homelander hovered slightly above the ground, cape snapping dramatically, every movement precise yet unconstrained by gravity or reason. Ray stood firm, blue blade casting calm light across her determined face, her focus split between protecting innocence and navigating the extraordinary moral terrain presented by this being. The Empire remnants, regrouping in the shadows of nearby towers, had coordinated a new, more aggressive assault. This time, squads equipped with experimental energy nets, tactical droids, and advanced blasters moved in from multiple angles. Their intent was clear: subdue or contain Homelander, harnessing him for their own designs. Above them, New Republic surveillance hovered, sensors picking up energy readings that defied comprehension. Leaders debated intervention strategies, hesitant to engage directly without understanding the full scope of the threat or opportunity. Homelander's gaze flicked toward the incoming threat. "So persistent," he murmured, amusement and mild irritation in his tone. He propelled himself upward, twisting mid-air to intercept a volley of energy nets. Sparks erupted as the devices malfunctioned under his sheer power. Blaster fire ricocheted harmlessly, redirected in arcs that dazzled and terrified onlookers alike. Despite the chaos, he maintained an awareness of Ray's position, hovering close enough to interact, yet leaving her room to act independently. Ray's mind raced. She recognized a rare opening. Homelander's attention was fixated on the assault, yet he was subtly mirroring her protective maneuvers. The Force guided her toward precise manipulations, redirecting incoming energy blasts, subtly nudging enemies off balance, and shielding civilians without ever imposing her will on him. The synergy was delicate and unintended, yet unmistakable, two immensely powerful beings instinctively complementing each other. The moral tension sharpened. Rey could have attempted direct force restraint on Homelander, but she understood the risk. His unpredictable nature, combined with his alien physiology, could render any overt action catastrophic. Instead, she chose the path of influence, guiding both allies and opponents through subtle nudges, diplomacy, and the strategic application of the Force. Each decision carried immense consequence for herself, the civilians, and the galaxy. "Impressive," said Homelander, floating closer, his voice low but carrying over the chaos. "You're different from anyone I've met. Most beings just fight. You think, influence, survive." His crimson eyes lingered on hers, fascination and something deeper, possibly attraction, flickering in their depths. Rey felt the Force pulse, cautioning her against the allure, yet recognizing an unprecedented opportunity to shape a being of immense power without coercion.
The Empire remnants, sensing the disruption, deployed a heavier offensive, automated turrets and droid squads firing coordinated volleys. Sparks ignited across the plaza as Homelander intercepted with precision, dismantling threats mid-air, while Rey reinforced the protective barriers around the few remaining civilians. The interplay of raw strength and Force-guided strategy created an almost choreographed battle, chaotic yet methodical in execution. A subtle tension threaded through the night. Rey realized that she was not merely protecting the city, she was negotiating, morally and strategically, with one of the most powerful beings she had ever encountered. Homelander, for his part, was testing limits, not just of the city or factions, but of her judgment, influence, and restraint. His fascination with her was apparent. He seemed almost eager to explore boundaries, both tactical and emotional. Above them, the city's lights flickered as energy pulses from the ongoing conflict surged across circuits and reflective surfaces. Criminal factions observed from rooftops, debating whether to intervene, manipulate, or remain passive. The New Republic maintained surveillance, aware that any misstep could spark full-scale catastrophe. And in the center, Rey and Homelander moved with a fluid understanding, balancing chaos, morality, and unspoken connection. Finally, Rey sensed a decisive moment. She projected a subtle, calming influence through the Force, urging Homelander to hold back, not through control, but suggestion. He hovered, sensing her intention, his head tilting as he evaluated the unfamiliar dynamic. "I like how you think," he murmured, voice low, almost reverent. "There's strategy in compassion. I didn't expect that." The night seemed to pause. Above the city, factions recalibrated, civilians watched in awe, and the plaza's chaos transformed into a crucible of morality, power, and tentative trust. Rey and Homelander, despite the galaxy surrounding them, existed in a suspended reality where choices, influence, and unspoken feelings intertwined. And in that suspended instant, Valentine's Day had truly transformed, not a festival of frivolity, but a test of hearts, morals, and galactic balance. The next move, by Empire, criminal factions, or the beings themselves, would determine the fate of both the city and the complex relationship now emerging in the Force's shadow.
The city of Coruscant trembled under the weight of unseen forces and raw power. Above the plaza, the swirling lights of emergency holograms cast jagged shadows across toppled market stalls and overturned droids. Rey's lightsaber hummed steadily in her hand, a calm blue against the chaos that crackled around her. Homelander hovered nearby, his crimson eyes glowing softly, reflecting the fractured light as he surveyed both the civilians and the various factions converging on the scene. Imperial remnants, regrouping from previous failures, began coordinating a more devious strategy. They activated specialized energy projectors designed to contain or incapacitate beings of exceptional power. This time, their goal was not simply to attack, but to provoke a moral test, to manipulate the unpredictable dynamic between Rey and Homelander. Blaster turrets adjusted their arcs to intercept projected movements, while jetpack troopers flanked from above. Every calculated action was met with Homelander's effortless counter, his reflexes and strength rendering conventional tactics ineffective. Rey sensed a moral crossroads emerging. She could attempt direct restraint, risking antagonizing Homelander and endangering the civilians, or she could continue guiding him through subtle influence and strategic suggestion. The Force pulsed with tension, urging her to weigh restraint against necessity. Homelander's fascination with her, his curiosity, admiration, and possibly attraction offered an unusual form of leverage. She could appeal to it, but the consequences were unpredictable. "Do you feel it?" Homelander asked suddenly, voice low but amused. "The chaos, the fear, the admiration? It's intoxicating." He hovered closer, tilting his head, observing her reaction. "But you're not just afraid. You're thinking, calculating. I like that." Rey's grip on her lightsaber tightened, though her stance remained poised. "Thinking doesn't mean acting recklessly," she said. "Power is meaningless without control and responsibility." Her words were as much a warning as they were a guide. The Force pulsed between them, a current of potential, morality, and subtle persuasion. The criminal underworld, observing from the rooftops and shadowed alleys, whispered calculations among themselves. Syndicates debated alliances, potential manipulation, and profit margins. A few recognized the unprecedented nature of this being, an alien entity with near limitless power, yet curious enough to cooperate with someone like Rey. The possibilities and dangers were unparalleled. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupted at the plaza's edge. Imperial reinforcements had deployed experimental war droids designed to detonate on impact. Rey reacted instinctively, using heat vision to vaporize several droids mid-air while diverting debris from civilians. Rey moved in tandem, subtly guiding displaced energy through the Force to ensure minimal collateral damage. Their movements formed an uneasy choreography of chaos, strategy, and emergent trust.
Yet, beneath the spectacle, the moral tension deepened. Homelander could act without restraint, yet he chose not to. His fascination with Rey influenced his decisions, creating an unprecedented interplay of emotion, attraction, and morality. Rey, in turn, struggled with the dangerous pull of his power and presence. Each choice, each subtle nudge of the Force, each defensive maneuver, each verbal cue had consequences for the civilians, the city, and the emerging relationship between them. Rey inhaled, focusing. She projected calm authority, guiding Homelander's attention to the flanking Imperial forces without imposing control. His eyes followed her subtle cues, adjusting trajectory and responses, as if testing her guidance, as if the challenge itself was part of an unspoken bond. "You're different from anyone I've met," Homelander admitted, hovering slightly above her. "Most beings either run or fight. You challenge, influence, survive. I like that." There was no threat in his voice, yet the underlying danger of his immense power remained palpable. Above them, factions paused. New Republic observers recalculated strategies, Imperial remnants hesitated, and criminal syndicates silently evaluated their next move. In the center of it all, Rey and Homelander existed in a suspended reality, a crucible where morality, raw power, and emotional connection intertwined. Valentine's Day had become more than a festival. It was a moral battlefield, a test of character, and the beginning of an unprecedented relationship. The next decisions, made in the swirling nexus of attraction, morality, and galactic stakes,
would reverberate far beyond the plaza, and perhaps reshape the balance of power in the galaxy itself. By now, Coruscant's lower levels echoed with the distant hum of blaster fire, mechanical whirring, and the occasional detonation as Imperial remnants attempted to regain control. Above, the plaza had become an arena where the interplay of power, morality, and emerging emotion was as significant as the physical battle itself. Rey's lightsaber glowed with steady intensity, her posture firm, projecting both authority and calm through the Force. Homelander hovered near her, his cape rippling in artificial wind currents, eyes locked on hers with an intensity that was almost disarming. The Imperial forces regrouped, deploying a squad of advanced jetpack troopers armed with experimental blasters designed to incapacitate high-tier threats. Their coordinated fire streaked across the plaza, but Homelander's reflexes were near perfect. He intercepted and redirected most shots with barely a flick of his hand. Yet for all his power, he remained aware of Rey's presence, adjusting his trajectory to avoid accidental harm. It was as if he were learning from her, subtly influenced, not commanded, by the guidance she projected through the Force. Rey exhaled slowly, recognizing the narrowing window for decisive action. The moral complexity of the situation weighed on her. Homelander's immense power was both a shield and a potential catastrophe. She could not impose control directly, nor could she allow reckless impulses to escalate the battle. Instead, she focused on influence, guiding, suggesting, and shaping outcomes with the Force, while appealing to the emerging curiosity and admiration she sensed in him. Homelander's voice cut through the crackling tension, low and amused. "You're clever, Rey," he said. "Most would fight, scream, or flee. You guide, protect, influence. I like that." He hovered closer, tilting his head, eyes scanning her face. His fascination was evident, not just curiosity, but a recognition of her strength, her morality, and perhaps, dangerously, the spark of connection between them. The Empire launched a final coordinated strike, a trio of experimental energy projectors aimed to ensnare Homelander in a containment field, while dozens of automated droids flanked the plaza from multiple angles. For a moment, it seemed the sheer force of combined technology might overwhelm even him. Yet in an almost instinctual display of raw power, Homelander moved with precision, dismantling projectors mid-activation and sending droids scattering harmlessly into the air. Sparks rained down, reflecting against glass towers like fragmented fireworks, yet civilians remained protected thanks to Rey's subtle Force guidance. The synergy between them, unspoken and unplanned, was extraordinary, an interplay of strategy, raw power, and emergent trust. And then came the moral choice, the pivotal moment that would define the encounter. Homelander could annihilate all threats in an instant, demonstrating superiority but risking irreversible consequences and civilian panic. Alternatively, he could trust Rey's guidance, restrain his impulses, and allow both their strategic and moral influence to shape the outcome. He paused, hovering in midair, crimson eyes flickering as if weighing the options. Rey sensed the decision forming in him and projected a calm, steady nudge through the Force. Not coercion, but suggestion. "You have strength beyond imagining," she said softly, locking eyes with him. "But strength without choice is chaos. Choose restraint. Protect. Don't dominate." A brief silence descended over the plaza, broken only by distant alarms and the hum of energy weapons. Homelander's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he absorbed her words. For a being capable of immense destruction, he chose, for the first time in this galaxy, to exercise conscious restraint, influenced by trust, admiration, and perhaps nascent affection. He moved with deliberate precision, neutralizing threats in a controlled manner, redirecting droid attacks and preventing any harm to civilians. The Empire remnants, stunned by his restraint, faltered in their assault, retreating where they could. Above, New Republic observers recorded the unprecedented event, sensing both the threat averted and the potential of an extraordinary alliance, or complication, emerging in the galaxy. Rey and Homelander hovered at the center of the plaza, the chaos around them settling into a tense calm. The moral and physical test had reached its climax, power tempered by guidance, raw force restrained by empathy, and two beings recognizing mutual potential, both as protectors and as something far more personal. The night held a fragile silence, a moment suspended between victory and the unknown, where morality, power, and emotion converged. Valentine's Day had transformed from festival to crucible, revealing not only strength, but the delicate interplay of trust, attraction, and choice.
Dawn began to break over Coruscant, pale orange and violet light spilling across the skyline, reflecting on shattered holo displays and glass towers. The plaza, once chaotic with blaster fire, sparks, and screams, now lay in a tense calm, the aftermath of unprecedented choices, visible in scattered debris, and the lingering hum of protective energy from Rey's force manipulations. Civilians cautiously emerged from hiding, their eyes wide at the extraordinary beings who had safeguarded them. Homelander hovered slightly above the ground, crimson eyes scanning the plaza, assessing both the aftermath and Rey. Despite his immense power, there was a new deliberateness to his movements, a careful calculation, influenced subtly by her moral guidance and the unspoken connection forming between them. He exuded confidence, yes, but not unchecked arrogance. There was curiosity, fascination, and perhaps the first glimmer of restraint rooted in something beyond domination. Rey, standing firmly with her lightsaber deactivated, allowed the Force to wash over the plaza, sensing the lingering energies and stabilizing what remained chaotic. Civilians were safe, Imperial remnants were retreating, and the criminal underworld had temporarily withdrawn to reassess opportunities. Yet the moral landscape remained complex. Each faction had been tested, every choice scrutinized, and the consequences of Homelander's actions had rippled across the city in ways still unfolding. "You made the right choice," Rey said softly, her voice steady but carrying weight. "Strength is more than power. It's what you protect, how you act, and the choices you make when no one can stop you." She paused, studying him carefully. Not everyone would listen, not everyone would restrain themselves. Homelander tilted his head, crimson eyes softening in a rare display of contemplation. "I like listening to you," he murmured. "Most beings I meet either submit or fight. You guide, influence, challenge, and yet you protect. It's different." His gaze lingered on her in a way that made the Force pulse subtly around her, a mixture of attraction, admiration, and the dangerous spark of emotional connection. As the New Republic hover squads finally descended for assessment, they hesitated, unsure whether to intervene or simply record the scene. The Empire remnants, chastened by their failure, retreated into the shadows, aware that they had encountered a being unlike any they had faced, and one unlikely to be contained with conventional measures. Criminal factions disappeared into the alleys, some frustrated, others curious, knowing the city had just witnessed a power beyond their comprehension.
Rey's heart raced, not with fear, but with the awareness of potential. Homelander's presence in this galaxy was unprecedented, morally complex, and emotionally provocative. His attraction to her was unmistakable, yet tempered by curiosity and respect. She realized that this Valentine's Day had become more than a battle. It was a crucible of morality, power, and emerging trust, the outcome of which would reverberate across sectors for years to come. The wind shifted through the plaza, carrying the first warmth of morning, scattering dust and sparks. Homelander descended to stand beside Rey, a faint smile crossing his face.
"So what now?" he asked, almost teasing, yet the question carried genuine weight. "Do we continue this dance, or do we see where it takes us?" Ray exhaled, the force calming around her. "We move forward cautiously," she said, "but together, if you choose. Power without guidance is dangerous, but power tempered with understanding can change worlds." For a moment, the two stood side by side, the galaxy stretching out before them, filled with potential allies, enemies, and uncharted possibilities. Factions would rebuild, criminals would recalculate, and the Empire remnants would linger in shadow. But the bond forged in the crucible of that Valentine's night had shifted the balance of power in ways subtle yet profound. Above them, the sun broke fully over Coruscant's horizon, illuminating the plaza and the city beyond. Homelander's gaze softened as he looked at Ray, recognition in a complex mixture of attraction and admiration evident. Ray, in turn, felt the force pulsing around them both, not just as a guide, but as a witness to the beginnings of a precarious, powerful, and morally charged partnership. The night's trials had ended, but the story was far from over. The galaxy had changed, and in the interplay of power, choice, and the beginnings of an unusual bond, the seeds of future conflict and future connection had been planted. Valentine's Day on Coruscant had ended in a tense, unprecedented calm. The plaza, once a chaotic battleground of blaster fire, energy projectors, and moral dilemmas, now lay scattered with debris and the quiet hum of residual energy. Civilians emerged cautiously, whispering among themselves in awe and confusion. Ray and Homelander stood side by side, two beings of extraordinary power whose interaction had reshaped not just the plaza, but the moral and strategic landscape of the city, and potentially the galaxy itself. The main conflict had resolved in a way that balanced power, morality, and choice. Homelander, despite possessing the capability to obliterate the Imperial remnants, the criminal opportunists, and even the city itself, had exercised restraint. His fascination with Ray, combined with her subtle but consistent guidance through the Force, had shaped a path that minimized harm and protected the vulnerable. The Empire remnants retreated. The new Republic observed with cautious curiosity, and criminal factions recalculated their strategies, recognizing that this new variable, a being capable of near godlike destruction, yet open to moral influence, was one they could not predict or control. For Ray, the encounter reinforced the Jedi principle that true strength is not measured solely by power, but by how it is wielded. Yet this scenario had pushed her beyond traditional Jedi constraints, forcing her to navigate attraction, diplomacy, and subtle influence simultaneously. The interplay of emotion and strategy created a delicate balance. Every action had consequences not only for the immediate conflict, but also for the future trajectory of relationships, alliances, and galactic events. Homelander, for his part, had discovered something unfamiliar: the intrigue of restraint, the challenge of moral choice, and the unexpected pull of connection. His raw power remained virtually unchecked, yet the potential for partnership and perhaps love with Ray introduced a dimension of vulnerability and possibility he had not previously considered. Their bond, forged in the crucible of chaos, hinted at the beginnings of a partnership that could redefine power dynamics across the galaxy. This Valentine's Day had become more than a holiday. It was a turning point. The galaxy had witnessed not just a battle of strength, but a test of morality, strategy, and emotional complexity. Homelander and Ray emerged changed, one aware of the potential in guiding his destructive power, the other aware of the profound consequences of influence and empathy in shaping a being whose potential was nearly limitless. As dawn fully broke over Coruscant, the city awoke to a world subtly altered. Factions would continue to maneuver, opportunities and threats would arise, but the presence of Ray and Homelander, together, yet morally complex and emotionally intertwined, introduced an unpredictable factor into every future equation. The galaxy had been reshaped not through sheer destruction, but through choice, restraint, and the beginnings of an extraordinary connection that could save worlds or challenge them in ways unimaginable. Their story, though momentarily paused, had only just begun. More stories awaits.